So we've had our Model 3 now for nearly a year, and over that time I've figured out quite a few of these interesting little details that I wish I'd known about at the start. So in this video we're going to take a look at those. If you're new to this channel, I make films on design, usability and workflow, so I'm really interested in how we can optimize our day-to-day experiences with the stuff that we own and use, and with the Tesla Model 3 there's no exception there, so some of these are kind of good optimization workflows to look at as well. So getting your head around these charging settings is really actually quite confusing the first time you look at it. It's kind of taken me a little while to actually figure this out. So basically you're not looking at two exclusive settings. It's not a question of deciding if you want to use the charge mode or the departure mode. You can actually have preconditioning from the departure mode enabled at the same time as the charge start setting in the charge setting if you want to. So it's a more subtle difference there. So what we're actually looking at is, preconditioning is just an option. You can have it preconditioned or not. If you turn it on, it will warm the cabin and the battery by the scheduled departure time that you put in here, and that can be either all week or just weekdays. And that actually works even if you're not charging. If you're not plugged into a charger, it will still do that. So that's just a setting. You can just set that and forget it. So you can enable that and not worry too much at this point about the charge timer. You haven't got to work it all out together. So once you've decided on whether you want preconditioning or not, you then decide how you want it to work out when it should charge. So these two are exclusive options. They're in the different tabs. One's in the charge tab and one's in the departure tab, but they're actually, you can't have them at the same time. So you have to decide if you basically want the car to schedule its charging to finish at a certain time, or based on a schedule where you tell it to start at a certain time. So basically, if you do want to use preconditioning, it's going to be more efficient to base this on a scheduled finishing time for the charge, because obviously the later the charge happens or the closer the charge happens to your departure time, the more efficient that process is going to be, because obviously charging the battery helps warm it up. If you're not using the preconditioning option, then it doesn't matter quite so much, and you might just want to say, well, you'll use the charge start time, so have it charge at the same time to coincide with the start of your off-peak rate overnight. So telling it about the end of the off-peak time is a little bit of a better approach, I think, because if you do need a big charge, you've come home with an empty battery and you need it full and you're setting off early in the morning, if you do that and you plug it in when you get home the previous night, it's going to start probably before the start of your off-peak rate, but it will give you the charge that you need and it will finish. Whereas if you told it to start of your off-peak rate, say midnight, and you were leaving early, you might not have enough time for the battery to get the charge that you need. So the key is really just to sort of not think about this as being too connected to whether you're preconditioning or not. That's a simple option by itself. It's not really related to charging, but there is of course that slight efficiency benefit if you bring the end of the charging as close to your departure time for the preconditioning as possible. This used to just be only possible to set up in the car itself, and it was a little bit more confusing with the interface in there. But now that we can do this in the app, it actually makes it a little bit clearer. You see the sort of description of what's happening, and it makes it a bit easier to understand what it's doing. So the second thing that I'm really pleased that I did was get the genuine Tesla mud flaps. Now these are a little bit controversial. So they've got this really long extension, and it actually only finishes about half an inch off the floor. And yes, it does rub over, any undulation in the road. If you're doing a little bit of a tight corner, the car dips down, you'll hear it rubbing. Speed bumps and stuff, it will definitely catch. But it's a very flappy mud flap, and it's not doing anything any harm. And it's so low that you're definitely protecting the sills quite nicely. And obviously we've had some paint issues with the Teslas on the sills. I actually had this fault on mine. They resprayed them, no questions asked, both sides, even though only one was peeling. They did them both. So Elon Musk recognized that fault with the paint that they had. But obviously it is an exposed area of the car, the sills, and you don't want any stone chips hitting that to chip away at the paint. So if you've got a low mud flap there, you're going to increase the protection on those sills. And the genuine Tesla ones obviously designed with that in mind. You can have them without the extension if you want to. You can take that off and have a shorter flap. And a lot of people do that, but I think that's that's a mistake. I wouldn't really worry about the noise it makes when it grinds. I actually quite like it. It's kind of like a rally car. You just got these great big mud flaps. They're protecting the car. Doesn't matter if it grinds when you go around a corner. It's just the flap, and it's definitely floppy enough to handle that. So there are third-party options that go higher up on the wheel arch, but they're not as long as the Tesla ones with the extension. So I think definitely the best option is to go with the extension here. Now there is this interesting weak spot I think that catches stones. It's just this little lip behind the rear door. So of the rear quarter panel just behind the door, that little lip tends to catch stones, and I've seen that a couple of times. And Tesla actually do sell a PPF sheet just for that little bit of the car, and I think it's actually a pretty good idea to get that. I haven't done it, and I've got the chips now, so I'm kind of thinking I won't bother, but had I known about that when I got the car, I probably would have got those. Something's about £50 or something, and you can stick those on to those corners just to give that bit of extra protection as well. That plus their mud flaps, I think, kind of gives you a good peace of mind for that bit of the car. So the next one is absolutely essential. It's a screen protector for the big screen in the middle. You know, if this gets a scratch on it, it doesn't bear thinking about. You're going to be stuck with it for the life of the car. Whacking a screen protector on solves that problem. You can replace the screen protector if you need to, but it's just giving it constant protection. You know, it's quite nice to keep the screen, you know, nice and clean. You give it a wipe, but of course wiping it does increase the risk that you can actually scratch it with a bit of dust that's on there as you're cleaning it. So you're cleaning a fingerprint off, but you're increasing the risk of scratching it. That's always the problem with screens. With a screen protector on it, you know, you can just wipe it. It's not going to do any harm at all. And if you scratch the screen protector, you can just replace it. So there are glossy ones and kind of diffused matte ones. And the diffused matte one has an interesting effect. It kind of makes it look a little bit, so I guess it is slightly fuzzy, but you don't really notice it and you get used to it. But it does stop the hard reflections. It diffuses the reflections on the glass. It does make it a little bit easier to see against the glare sometimes if you've got a bright reflection. The screen's very bright. It's not really generally an issue. But that was my choice. I went with the diffused one there. So I'm really happy with the one that I bought. This was the Spiegen one. It comes with this frame that helps you install it on the screen and guarantees it to basically be the right place on the screen. They actually offered me a freebie, but I'd already bought this one myself anyway, so there we go. So the next thing to get your head around is setting up Wi-Fi for the car. So basically that's how it receives these updates. So it's, obviously Tesla are known for their frequent updates, and they definitely do that. And it's brilliant that the car gets these updates, and you can choose whether you want the sort of cutting edge updates or if you want to slow down a little bit on the updates and wait for the more stable releases. And obviously setting up Wi-Fi for your car wherever you park it around your house, in our case on our driveway, normally your Wi-Fi signal isn't very strong. And I do find the Tesla's Wi-Fi antenna isn't that good either. It does struggle to pick up the signal. So it needs a good signal for it to get its Wi-Fi connection. So what I'd recommend there is, if you haven't got one set up, is a mesh network, and you use one of the nodes to sort of reproduce your Wi-Fi near your driveway. So we've got one node in our garage, which obviously just then gives the driveway good signal coming out from the garage there, whereas it wouldn't have got through the gable end of our house. So I'll link to the mesh network that I use in the description below as well. So I'm really happy with this. It's a little bit expensive. There are cheaper ones, but I actually had that before, and it was nothing like as good as this one in terms of reliability of the connection. So yeah, definitely happy to recommend the one I'm using now. So the next thing to set up is the driver profiles. Amazing feature here that sets your wing mirror position, the seating position and the steering wheel position based on just you getting in the car. So it knows who you are from your phone key, which you set up. And when you get in, it switches to your profile. So make sure you set up your phone as the key and attach it to the driver profile, which you need to do in the settings here. The other interesting thing I think is to set up your own Tesla account. So you can, obviously the owner of the car has their own Tesla account, but for the other people in your house that are driving it, they can have their own sort of proper account with Tesla that references your car, so you're not all sharing the same credentials to get onto the app. So that's, from a security perspective, that's a little bit more sensible. All right, so this next one is really interesting. It's taken me a long time to get my head around how this works. So the indicators and the full beam stalks are not like any other car I ever had. They return to their central position, you know, as a thing. There's no other central position. A normal indicator, I click it up and it would stay up physically. With the Tesla indicator, there is no physical other position than its home position, the stalks, and that applies to both the stalks. It's just the way they are. Whatever happens, they will always physically come back to that central position. So things like an indicator where you want it to go up and stay on sometimes, in a normal car you'd click it up and it would physically stay up. Obviously there's the point where it clicks back off again, but that's a physical process, whereas with the Tesla, it's not a physical process. So there's a half press and a full press, and they do different things. So when you're indicating, if you do a half press, it will go on for 3 flashes and it will just self-cancel after the 3 flashes. If you do the full press, it clicks it on as if, you know, it's trying to sort of simulate the full click of a normal indicator. So if you do the full press, it will go on and it will self-cancel again in the same way that a normal car would. But there's a big problem with this, especially in the UK. So in the UK, we've got roundabouts, and signaling on a roundabout is really important. The timing's really important, that you get your signal off at the right point, and people that don't do this cause no end of trouble. But basically what you want to do is you're obviously going around the roundabout, so you've got your right signal on. So you give it the full press to turn on the right signal. And then what needs to happen just before your exit, you turn off. So you give you the exit signal. Now this is where it causes all kinds of problems with these indicators. Normally with a traditional indicator, you just crank it down back into the left signal for your exit signal and it just works. So there's a really strange quirk in the Tesla, and that is that it will self-cancel the signal just as you've put the exit signal on. So you do the exit signal and it doesn't actually stay on. I don't know whether it even flashes off. It's like it just goes off and you don't get your exit signal, which can be a bit of a disaster on a roundabout. So the way to deal with that is when you give your exit signal, you do 2 full presses. So if you do 2 full presses, you'll get the exit signal. So basically, this is a kind of a bit of a weird thing you're doing on roundabouts, but it works. You know, you give your full right signal and then your exit signal is 2 full presses. It's repeatable and it kind of guarantees that you'll always get your exit signal in this situation. So this problem of them self-cancelling when the stalk physically is in its central position causes another problem as well, in that how do you cancel it if it's already in its central position? You know, with a normal indicator you could just click it back to its central position and you know that it's gone off. If it self-cancels at the same time, you kind of feel it in your hand and then it doesn't matter because you know you've got it back to the central position. If it's already in the central position, cancelling the signal is a little bit more complicated, especially if it decides to self-cancel at the same time. So in a car with a clicky indicator stalk, you'd cancel the signal by bringing it back the opposite way from the direction you pushed it to turn it on. So don't do that in the Tesla. The way to cancel the Tesla indicators is to do a half press in the same direction. So even if it cancels itself at the same moment you do your half press, it will just give you 3 more flashes and you can just leave it. You can actually do another half press and it would stop it. You can interrupt the 3 flash one with another half press in the same direction. But the key is to turn them off in the same way as you turn them on, because that eliminates the chance that you're going to end up, you know, flipping your indicators from the left to the right to try and stop it. So the same thing happens with the full beam stalk. You know, and in all the cars I've had so far, you put your full beam on, the stick physically moves forward, so you know whether it's in full beam or not. You can click it on or off, and if you flash, you pull it forward and it returns from that one. But when it's on permanently, the stick is physically further forward, so you can turn it off just by bringing it back. So the Tesla's automatic full beam thing is not reliable enough for normal driving. You still want to be cancelling those full beams. It will be blinding the other drivers for too long before it automatically figures it and cancels it out. But the automatic full beam is quite handy to leave on as a backup, basically. So if you forget to dip your lights, it will probably get there before the other person flashes you. But in normal driving, you still want to be cancelling it probably before the Tesla does. So if you pull it towards you while the full beam is on, it will dip them. But if it's cancelling that at exactly the same time, all that actually happens is you end up with the lights dipping automatically and then you pulling it, which flashes the headlights at the other person. So that's a disaster. You don't want to be doing that either. Luckily, there is a way that it works, and that is actually just to cancel your full beam by pushing away. So you push away in the same way you would turn it on. So you turn it on, push away, turn it off, push it away. And that's the most reliable way of dipping your headlights when there's someone oncoming, because that just turns off the automatic full beam. So even if it's just dipped automatically, all you're doing is still turning it off completely. So it won't come back on, because the automatic dip doesn't actually turn off the automatic full beam mode that's on. So all you do is you're just turning the whole thing off. So it's dipped automatically, then you just turn it off again. That's all that's happening. And then obviously you push it away to turn it back on, and it'll go back if it thinks it's okay to go into full beam again. So that solves that problem. Totally different to other cars I've driven. Really important to get your head around. Hopefully I've clarified kind of the subtlety of what's involved with that stalk. So like with a lot of modern cars, the Tesla doesn't come with any kind of provision for a flat tyre. It doesn't even come with a tyre sealant. When you buy it, you have to buy that separately for £80, which gives you the compressor and the gel that goes in the tyre. I found the Holts Tyreweld to be a much cheaper way of dealing with this. I always got a can or two in the car, and I've used this actually within a couple of months of having the car. I got a flat tyre. I've done a video on that process as well to show you how it works. Interestingly, when I took the tyre to have the puncture repaired, that was some months after, by the time I got round to it, I was a bit concerned that the tyre sealant would cause them issues, and they actually had no issue at all. I told them about it and they let me have a look inside the tyre. There's hardly anything there. It didn't interfere with the foam inside the tyre either. I don't know quite what happened to the stuff that came out of the can, but it kind of just sort of, I don't know, just disappeared. Like it's just dissolved or soaked into the foam perhaps, I don't know, but it didn't cause them any issues. The foam didn't cause them any issues either. They were quite happy just to cut that bit away to do the proper repair on that hole. So definitely the Holts Tyreweld's a product that I've used a long time and recommend that. So the next key thing that you want to sort out is a protector for the seat. There's something about the Tesla seats that makes them dent really badly with car seats. I think it actually happens as a result of them being left in there, especially on a hot day. I don't think it actually happens as a result of the kids sitting on the seats. It's more like when they're left there on a hot day, it sort of sinks into the seat and you end up with these dents that I don't know if they'd ever go out. You know, it's pretty bad when you see pictures of these on the internet. So what I've done is actually we've got the dog now, so we've got a big full back seat cover for the dog, but prior to the dog, I put a normal seat protector behind the kids' car seats. And I've actually since switched from the big car seats that we had before to these little MiFold car seats. They're really interesting. So they're a lot lighter and they don't go down into the seat as much when you leave them. So I think that's a sort of, you might be able to just get away with no protector if you went down that road. And my kids are quite happy in those car seats as well. So they're an interesting product. So this next one's really important. I think it's kind of almost a bit dangerous that it's not the default option, or even it should only be the only option really, and that's enabling creep mode. So basically, if you're not in the creep mode, what happens is you can be in drive with nothing on the pedals and the car's kind of stationary, and if you touch the accelerator, it goes forward. Now, if you're not sure about how sensitive the throttle is as you're new to the car, you realise that throttle is kind of like a weapon. It can propel the car forwards at ridiculous speeds. So if you're trying to park the car in a tight parking space and you have to push the accelerator to make the car go from 0 miles an hour to moving forwards, that's a little bit risky because you don't have any point of reference. And if you're new to it, you give too much of that, suddenly the car's gone into the car in front of you. Whereas in creep mode, you're controlling that low speed acceleration with your brake pedal. So you come off the brake, the car will creep forward, and you can slow it back down by coming on the brake. So you're never even going on the accelerator. So whatever happens with your foot, you're only going to slow it down by pushing it in. That's much safer. It's how normal automatic cars work with the torque converters, and I think the electric car should simulate that by default. It's great when it's turned on. It just behaves exactly like that. Super good control at low speeds. I would hate to think of the car not going anywhere until you press the accelerator, though, because that would be. I think there have been reports of, they call it unintended acceleration, and Tesla looked into it and said it's always as a result of somebody pushing the accelerator. That may be true, but I don't suppose those cars were in creep mode. And there's that video that went around with the Porsche. I suspect it was something similar there. Maybe the driver thought it was the brake pedal they were pushing, I don't know. But I think it was obviously a full bore accelerator press that shot it off the edge of the driveway. So the last little tip is a really good one with the Tesla. The back wheels are very prone to hitting on pavements. I don't know, there's something about the visibility. They're kind of out of sight and they sort of seem further back and wider than you kind of think they are. So it's very easy to get them on the pavement. Both my wife and I have done this with the Tesla. So Tesla do a repair service on them, so I'm not too concerned. I'll do that at some point. So basically what you want to do when you get this car for the first time is really spend some time familiarizing yourself with what the reversing lines on the screen mean in terms of how close you are to the pavement. So practice, parallel parking against a curb and just see what those lines mean, so that you can do this repeatedly and know how close you are to the pavement based on reference points on the screen, because those wheels are super vulnerable. The tyres are too narrow for the wheels because of aerodynamics or something. I've never seen a tyre that's kind of stretched over the wheel like this with a Tesla, so it means the rim itself is extremely exposed, and combined with the visibility and the proportions, it's a very easy car to curb. So definitely worth familiarising yourself with what those reference points look like on the screen. So I hope that's been useful. Let me know if I've kind of confused you with anything, and I can hopefully clarify in the comments below. And of course, let me know if I've missed anything for other people as well. It'll be useful in the comments. Have a look around the channel. I've done a couple of other Tesla videos, also looking at sort of productivity and computing and efficiency and workflow, all this kind of interesting stuff. There's something for everyone. Hopefully you'll agree it's worth subscribing, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.